Hello and welcome back to the Sleepy Historian. Find a comfortable place. Let the sounds of the world outside fade away, and allow your mind to drift back in time with me. Tonight, we are pulling back the heavy tapestry of romance that so often cloaks our vision of the past. We think of medieval weddings, of princes and princesses, as the grand finales of fairy tales. A culmination of love, a promise of happily ever after. But did you know that, for a medieval prince, his wedding day was often the most terrifying, anxiety-ridden day of his life? A day fraught with political peril, public humiliation, and profound personal dread. It was less a celebration of love, and more the signing of a treaty with his own future as the collateral. If you find these quiet journeys into the past a welcome comfort in your evening, perhaps consider subscribing. It helps our small corner of history continue to grow. Now, close your eyes and let us attend a royal wedding. Not as a guest celebrating a joyous union, but as a silent observer to the crushing weight of a crown. Imagine a young man, perhaps no older than 16, standing in a cold stone chamber. He is a prince. He has been trained since birth in warfare, in statecraft, in the brutal calculus of power. But today, the maps of enemy territories and the ledgers of the royal treasury are pushed aside. In their place is a single document, its wax seal bearing the crest of a foreign kingdom, a kingdom that was, until recently, a bitter rival. This document is his marriage contract. It is not a love letter. It is a list of territories, titles, and trade agreements. His bride, a girl he has never met, is not described in terms of her kindness or her wit, but by the size of her dowry and the strategic value of her father's lands. For this prince, the wedding is not the beginning of a life with a soulmate. It is the most significant political maneuver of his young reign. The pressure is immense. A successful marriage could bring decades of peace and prosperity, securing his dynasty for generations. A failed one, a union that produces no heir, or one that sours relations with his new, powerful in-laws, could plunge his kingdom into war and chaos. Every single person in his realm, from the lowliest farmer to the highest-ranking duke, has a stake in this union. Their livelihoods, their very lives, depend on him making this work. He is not just a groom. He is a keystone in an arch of international diplomacy, and he can feel the weight of the entire structure pressing down upon his shoulders. His anxiety begins not with the approach of the wedding day, but months, even years, earlier, in the cold, calculating world of dynastic negotiation. He is a piece on a chessboard, moved by the hands of his father, the king, and his council of advisors. He might hear whispers of potential matches from the time he is a child. A princess from the north with rich timberlands. A duchess from the south whose ports could dominate the sea trade. His own preferences, his own desires for companionship or affection are utterly irrelevant. They are a luxury his station cannot afford. The ideal bride is a cocktail of political advantage, fertile bloodline, vast wealth, and strategic geography. Messengers on horseback crisscross the continent for months, carrying missives filled with offers and counter-offers. It is a market, and he is both the buyer and part of the goods being sold. He might be betrothed as a toddler to a girl who is not yet born, his future sealed before he can even speak his own name. Or he might face a sudden, urgent match, a desperate alliance forged in the crucible of an impending war. Imagine the uncertainty of it all. Waiting to hear which foreign court will become his second family, which strange land his wife will call home. The names and faces of potential brides blur into a tapestry of heraldic symbols and territorial claims. Each choice carries with it a web of new obligations, new friends, and more importantly, new enemies. Marrying the princess of a neighboring kingdom might secure one border, but it could infuriate the kingdom on the other side, sparking a conflict that he will be expected to lead. The weight of these decisions, made for him, but impacting him most of all, would be a constant, nagging presence in his young life. When the choice is finally made, The abstract anxiety coalesces around a single, terrifying unknown, the bride herself. Who is this person with whom he is expected to share a bed, produce an heir, and rule a kingdom? In an age without photography, his only glimpse of his future wife might be a miniature portrait. These portraits were notoriously unreliable, commissioned by the bride's family to be as flattering as possible. Artists were masters of propaganda, smoothing away blemishes, slimming faces, and adding a rosy glow that might not exist in reality. The prince would stare at this tiny, idealized image, trying to glean some hint of the real person. Is she kind? Is she cruel? Is she intelligent or dull? Is she pious or frivolous? He has no way of knowing. He hears rumors, of course, filtered through the reports of ambassadors and spies. He might hear she is beautiful, but also proud and difficult, or that she is plain, but gentle and obedient. These are just whispers, fragments of a person he is bound to for life. The greatest fear, unspoken but ever-present, was infertility. A royal marriage had one primary, non-negotiable purpose: to produce a male heir. A barren queen was a political catastrophe. It meant the alliance had failed in its most fundamental duty. It opened the door for succession crises, civil war, and the potential collapse of his dynasty. So, as the prince studies the painted face of a stranger, he is not just wondering if he will find her attractive. He is wondering if she is a political asset or a liability, if she will be a partner or a viper in his court. And most terrifyingly, if her body will deliver the son that the entire kingdom demands of her. The weight of the future rests on the womb of a woman he has never even spoken to. While the prince grapples with the identity of his bride, the kingdom groans under the financial strain of the impending union. A royal wedding was not a simple affair. It was a spectacle of power and wealth, designed to awe and intimidate rivals. The cost was astronomical. The bride's dowry, while an injection of cash or land, often came with strings attached and was just one part of the equation. The groom's kingdom was expected to fund the bride's journey, which could be a monumental undertaking. A princess might travel for weeks or months, accompanied by a massive retinue of ladies-in-waiting, knights, servants, and priests. This entire procession had to be housed, fed, and protected, a moving city inching its way across a dangerous landscape. The prince's treasury would be drained to pay for the security, the provisions, and the lavish gifts expected at every major stop. And this was all before the wedding itself. The ceremony and the subsequent feast, which could last for days, were a theater of opulence. New clothes of velvet and silk, threaded with gold and silver, had to be made for the entire royal family and the court. Jewels were brought out from the vaults. The greatest chefs in the land were summoned to prepare mountains of food. Roasted swans, peacocks redressed in their feathers, intricate sugar sculptures. Tournaments were held, with prizes of fine horses and armor. Minstrels and poets were hired to sing the praises of the new couple. It was a kingdom-wide effort, and the cost could cripple the economy for years, requiring new and unpopular taxes on the common folk. The prince would be acutely aware of this. He would see the ledgers, hear the complaints of his treasurer. He knew that this celebration, meant to signify prosperity, was in fact a massive financial gamble. If the alliance failed, he would have bankrupted his kingdom for nothing. Then comes the journey. The bride's procession, a glittering serpent of wealth and nobility, is a prime target for bandits, pirates, or political enemies. The prince waits, and the waiting is its own form of torture. Every day without news is a day filled with dread. Has her ship been caught in a storm? Has her caravan been ambushed in a mountain pass? History is littered with tales of princesses who never reached their destination, who were captured and held for ransom, or who perished from illness on the arduous journey. The prince's entire political future, the stability of his realm, is traveling in a carriage hundreds of miles away, vulnerable to the whims of weather and the blades of brigands. He is utterly powerless, a spectator to the most critical logistical operation of his life. The delay of a messenger could send the court into a panic. A rumor of an attack could feel like the sky falling. He would spend his days in council, pretending to focus on matters of state, while his mind was on the road, picturing 1,000 different disasters. This period of waiting was a crucible of anxiety, a long, drawn-out test of his nerve. The relief upon her safe arrival would be immense, but it was only a temporary reprieve. The arrival of the bride meant the arrival of the wedding day itself, and with it, a whole new set of fears. The abstract threats of the journey were now replaced by the immediate, tangible terror of the ceremony and the consummation. Finally, the day arrives. The prince and his bride meet, perhaps for the first time, only moments before they are to be joined for life. Imagine the suffocating formality of that first encounter. They stand in a grand hall, surrounded by the highest-ranking nobles of 2 kingdoms. Every eye is upon them. Every subtle gesture, every flicker of an expression is noted and analyzed. Does he look pleased? Does she seem disappointed? A slight frown could be interpreted as a grave insult, a sign of weakness, or a bad omen for the future of the alliance. There is no room for genuine human connection. They are not 2 young people getting to know each other. They are symbols, embodiments of their respective nations. They exchange stilted, rehearsed pleasantries, their voices echoing in the cavernous space. The prince must appear confident, regal, and welcoming, even if his heart is pounding with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and perhaps even revulsion. He must assess his bride in an instant. Is the portrait a lie? Is she as beautiful as they said? Or is she plain, or scarred, or does she carry herself with an arrogance that promises future conflict? He has to mask his true reaction completely. Any sign of disappointment would be a diplomatic incident. He is an actor on the grandest stage, and he has not had a single rehearsal. This first meeting is a tightrope walk over a chasm of political ruin, and the entire court is watching, waiting for him to fall. From this awkward first meeting, the prince is swept into the preparations for the ceremony. He is dressed by his chamberlains in layers of impossibly rich fabric. The clothes are heavy, restrictive, and designed for display, not comfort. A velvet doublet, a silk tunic, a heavy cloak trimmed with ermine. A circlet or crown is placed on his head, its weight a constant reminder of his duty. He feels less like a man and more like an idol being adorned for a ritual. As he walks towards the cathedral, the streets are lined with his subjects. They cheer for him, but their cheers are not just for his happiness. They are cheering for the security and prosperity they hope this marriage will bring. They are cheering for a future heir. Their joy is a form of pressure. He cannot fail them. Inside the cathedral, the air is thick with the scent of incense and melting beeswax. The light filters through stained glass windows, painting the stone floor in jewels of color. The sheer scale of the building is designed to make one feel small and insignificant before the eyes of God, and the prince feels it. The wedding ceremony is not a private declaration of love. It is a sacred, binding oath sworn before God and man. The bishop's voice drones on in Latin, the words of the liturgy speaking of duty, fidelity, and procreation. The prince stands beside a woman he does not know, her hand in his. He can likely feel her trembling and knows it mirrors his own. He is making the most solemn vow of his life, binding his soul to hers, and he is doing it as a matter of state policy. The fear of divine judgment, of making a holy vow under false pretenses, would be a heavy weight on a pious prince. He is committing a form of perjury before the highest authority of all, pledging a love and devotion he does not, and may never, feel. As the ceremony concludes, the prince might feel a moment of relief, but it is fleeting. The public ordeal is far from over. Now comes the wedding feast, an event that combines the pressure of a diplomatic summit with the debauchery of a festival. The prince and his new wife are seated on a raised dais, the focal point of the entire hall. They must eat, or at least pretend to, while hundreds of people watch their every move. The food is rich, the wine flows freely, and the noise is deafening. Jesters perform, minstrels sing, and nobles engage in loud, drunken conversation. Amidst this chaos, the royal couple is an island of tense sobriety. They are expected to talk to one another, to look like a happy, newly married pair. But what can they possibly talk about? They have no shared history, no private jokes, no common language, perhaps. They might have to speak through an interpreter. Every whispered word, every shared glance is fodder for court gossip. Did he make her laugh? Did she look at him with affection? The prince must navigate this social minefield with perfect grace. He must also pay attention to his new in-laws, a powerful delegation of foreign nobles who are now his family. He must honor them, flatter them, and be wary of them all at once. They are watching him, judging his court, his wealth, his power. Any perceived slight could damage the fragile new alliance. The feast is not a celebration for him. It is hours of grueling, high-stakes performance art, all while his mind is consumed with the dread of what is to come next, the bedding ceremony. As the feast winds down and the night grows late, the most dreaded part of the wedding day begins. The public bedding ceremony was a common practice in medieval European royalty. It was the official, witnessed transition from political contract to physical union. It was considered essential to prove that the marriage had been consummated, thereby making it legally binding and irreversible. A procession of the highest-ranking guests, including family members, bishops, and lords, would escort the nervous couple to their bedchamber. This was not a quiet, private moment. It was loud, raucous, and filled with bawdy jokes and songs meant to encourage fertility. The prince and his bride are led into the chamber, where the royal bed, a massive, curtained structure, dominates the room. A priest blesses the bed, sprinkling it with holy water. The bride is undressed by her ladies-in-waiting, the prince by his squires, all in front of this audience of dignitaries. They are then put into the bed together. The curtains are drawn, but the guests do not always leave immediately. They might stay outside the door, or even in the room, waiting for evidence that the deed is done. Imagine the sheer, soul-crushing humiliation of it. The prince is expected to perform the most intimate act of his life with a complete stranger, while his father, his new father-in-law, and the most powerful men in the kingdom listen just a few feet away. The pressure is unimaginable. His personal virility is now a matter of international policy. Failure to perform, whether from nerves, fear, or simple lack of attraction, would be a public disaster. It would cast doubt on his manhood and the validity of the marriage. The entire alliance, the peace of the kingdom, the future of his dynasty, all of it rests on this one, profoundly unnatural and stressful act. It is the absolute antithesis of romance. It is a clinical, terrifying, and public duty. Even if the consummation is successful, the ordeal is not over. The next morning, the evidence of the consummation, typically the blood-stained bedsheets, would be displayed publicly. This was the final, irrefutable proof that the marriage was valid. For the prince, this is another layer of public scrutiny, a confirmation of his private actions broadcast to the entire court. He and his new wife are now truly bound together. The celebrations may continue for a few more days, but the prince's life has been irrevocably altered. He awakens not just as a husband, but as the guardian of a new and fragile political alliance. His wife is a constant reminder of his obligations. She is the living embodiment of a foreign power within his own home. He must learn to live with her, to trust her, or at least to coexist with her. Her retinue of foreign servants and advisors are now part of his court, a potential source of friction, cultural misunderstanding, and even espionage. He has to navigate the treacherous currents of court politics, balancing the interests of his own nobles with the demands of his new in-laws. His wife is not just a person. She is a political entity, and her happiness or unhappiness can have far-reaching consequences. If she feels mistreated, her powerful family will hear of it, and the alliance could crumble. The prince's personal life is now permanently intertwined with his public duty. There is no escape. The wedding was not an end, but the beginning of a lifetime of anxious vigilance. Over time, what might this life become? In the best of circumstances, the prince and his foreign bride might develop a genuine affection for one another. They might find common ground, a shared sense of duty, and build a partnership based on mutual respect. A successful marriage, one that produces healthy children and maintains peace, would be a source of immense relief and pride. The prince would have fulfilled his primary function, but this was by no means guaranteed. Many of these political marriages were miserable. The couple might be incompatible in every way, trapped in a loveless union, seeing each other only for formal occasions and the grimly determined act of trying to produce an heir. The court would be a lonely place for the prince, his wife a constant, alien presence in his life. He might seek solace in the arms of a mistress, but even that was fraught with risk, as it could be seen as an insult to his wife and her family. He is a prisoner in his own palace, bound by vows he was forced to make. His personal happiness was sacrificed on the altar of the state the day he stood in that cathedral. The joy of the wedding day, if any existed at all, was the joy of the crowd, the relief of his counselors, the satisfaction of his father. For the prince himself, the dominant emotions were fear, duty, and a profound, gnawing anxiety about the stranger in his bed and the uncertain future she represented. So, as we leave our young prince, perhaps standing on a balcony overlooking his kingdom in the pale light of dawn, we see him not as a fairy tale hero, but as a young man shouldering an almost unbearable burden. His wedding was the ultimate rite of passage, a trial by fire that tested his nerve, his diplomacy, and his ability to subordinate his own humanity to the relentless demands of the crown. The joyous bells that rang on his wedding day were not for him. They were for the kingdom. They rang for the promise of stability, the continuation of a bloodline, and the forging of an alliance that might, with luck, prevent the horrors of war. For the prince, those bells may have sounded more like a death knell, the end of his youth, the end of his freedom, and the beginning of a life sentence of anxious, watchful duty. It is a sobering thought that the events we romanticize as the pinnacle of happiness were, for those who lived them, often the deepest source of their fear. And in that quiet historical truth, perhaps there is a strange sort of comfort to be found. Now, rest easy and sleep well.